All right. Hello, this is Jim Schaefer, program host and executive editor of Rip Rap's academic book television program. And my guest today is Dr. Mona, and we're talking about her work, What Eyes Don't See, a story of crisis, resistance, and hope in American City. I was fascinated with the first part of the title. What did you mean about what the eyes don't see?
That title has many meanings, Jim, and it's great to be with you, and it's great to be on the show. So the title, What the Eyes Don't See, has the very literal meaning of lead in water. We don't see lead in water. It's odorless, it's invisible, it's colorless, it's invisible to the eye. We don't see it. We also do not see the impact of lead. Lead is known as a silent pediatric epidemic. So when children present to the clinic, I love to trick my medical students and my residents. I'm like, oh, how does a kid with lead poisoning present? And they'll be like, oh, they have school problems or behavior problems or stomach aches or headaches. And the answer is none of those. It's asymptomatic. We do not see the consequences of lead exposure. So that's kind of what it means very literally in terms of what the eyes don't see. But the story and this book is so much more than just about Flint. It is about people, it is about places, it is about problems that we choose not to see all over this country, all over this world. But really it's a rallying cry for all of us to open our eyes, to be aware to these injustices happening everywhere, and to act upon them.
I did some research and I found out there's lots of places in Michigan and thousands across the country that are bothered by lead and other toxins.
Absolutely. So this is an everywhere problem. But before Flint, the nation really thought it was a problem of yesterday. But lead exposure is a problem of today, and it's a problem of tomorrow. Lead is a heavy metal. It persists. And it is especially prevalent in our most underserved communities. Lead exposure is a known form of environmental injustice. Our kids in Flint already had higher rates of lead exposure, just like kids in Detroit and Chicago and Philadelphia and Baltimore. Some of our country's most vulnerable children all over who are already suffering from so many adversities to their development already have higher rates of lead exposure. And we fail to protect these children. We fail to protect their potential. So one of the great side effects or ripple effects of this water crisis is that we have raised the agenda of lead, and there's investment now in communities and nationally on lead prevention, lead elimination. It's still not enough, and week in, week out, we continue to hear about community after community that is suffering from preventable lead exposure.
And how did you get into studying this?
How did I get into studying this? Well, you'll have to read the book I know you did to really learn about kind of in a fast-paced way the first-hand account of kind of how I got into the story. So for about 17 months, my eyes were closed. I was very much blinded to what was happening in our water supply here in Flint. Patients would ask me, is the water okay? Should I mix this with my baby's formula? Is it safe for my kids to drink? Is it safe for me to bathe my babies in? And I was very much reassuring my patients that the water was okay, because we were being told that the water was okay. The state, the city, everybody said the water is okay. And who doesn't believe that when you turn on your tap that your water is not okay? This is America, the richest country in the history of the world. This is Michigan, so we are the mitten state. Here's Flint. We are literally surrounded by the largest source of fresh water in the world. But despite all that, we have rules and we have regulations and we have people whose jobs is to make sure that our water is okay. So despite the heroic work of the people of Flint, who are raising kind of alarm bells that something is wrong, my eyes were closed. But that all changed in the summer of 2015. And all very much by serendipity, I was at home with a high school girlfriend, Elin Batanzo. And Elin happens to be a drinking water expert. So it's really important to have best friends that are drinking water experts. And we're hanging out, our kids are playing together, having dinner, last minute barbecue at my house. And she shared with me what she knew, was that Flint wasn't treating its water properly. It wasn't using corrosion control. And because of that, there would be lead in the water. And that was the very, very first time I heard the word lead in our water. I'd heard about the bacteria and the color and the odor and the taste and all these other issues, but I never heard the word lead. And when a pediatrician hears the word lead, it's a call to action. There was nowhere to go but forward.
There was an event that caused, which is the switch. Maybe give commentary on that. What happened in the water?
Yeah, so why did we have lead in our water? Flint has been in crisis really for decades. Flint at one point was the birth of the auto industry, the birth of manufacturing. At one point had the highest per capita income in the country. Not too long ago, 1970s, people in Flint made the most money in the country. But that all changed, especially in the 1980s. Flint suffered from disinvestment, unemployment, poverty, population loss, decline in unions, racism, discrimination, violence, you name it. Almost every disparity possible, Flint has. In 2011, Flint was in near bankruptcy. And in Michigan, if you are a very poor city, the state can swoop in and take over. So in 2011, Flint became under the control of state-appointed emergency management. And the emergency manager's goal was austerity. It was to save money, to write the books. And they decided that the water that we had been getting from Detroit, which was fresh, pre-treated Great Lakes water from Lake Huron, was too expensive. And to save money, we would start drawing water from the local Flint River until a new pipeline to the Great Lakes was to be built. So in April of 2014, with a very simple flip of a switch, we started drawing water from the local Flint River, but that water was not treated properly. It was missing that important critical ingredient called corrosion control, and that made the Flint River water 19 times more corrosive than the water that we had been getting from Detroit. It was so corrosive that just a few months into this water switch in 2014, General Motors, which was born in Flint, still operates in Flint, stopped using this water because it was corroding their engine parts. Think about that. Our water was corroding engine parts. But the people of Flint were told that everything was okay.
It's not going away.
You cannot put dollars over people.
Well, and what I was fascinating back to the title is that you can't see the poison and you can't predict it. And in your book, you're talking a number of times of how difficult it is to understand how people are being poisoned by the lead in the water.
Yeah.
What are the dangers to the people in Flint who consume the water and know toxic things?
Yeah, so we talk, and I talk a lot about lead, and that's really what got me into this water issue. But this water crisis was a lot more than just about lead. I freaked out when I heard lead because, as a scientist, the field of medicine, public health, children's health has taught us a lot about lead. We know it's a potent, irreversible neurotoxin. We now know that there is no safe level of lead exposure. Lead levels we thought were okay back in the day when we had lead in paint and lead in gasoline, we now know are no longer okay. And even the lowest levels can impact children's cognition and behavior. It actually drops IQ levels and leads to behavioral problems. So there is no safe level of lead exposure. So lead was a big part of this crisis, but this crisis was so much more than that. Skin issues, that was one of the first manifestations of this crisis, was people's hair loss from the water. Little kids would come in with rashes up to the water line when they were interacting with this water. We also had one of the largest outbreaks of Legionnaire's disease, which is a pneumonia that elderly get, immunocompromised folks get, and people died from that, which is why we actually have homicide charges against some of the government officials. But by and large, this was a crisis of trust. Widespread betrayal by every government agency that was supposed to protect the people of Flint. There's fear, there's anger, there's a lot of guilt in the community. So this crisis, we have considered it like one big trauma, all these different things. And in the field of pediatrics and public health, we now recognize these traumas as toxic stresses. So this water crisis, all of it, was an added toxic stress on top of the many toxicities that the people of Flint are already facing. We have an almost 60% poverty rate for our children. It's a astounding. One of the highest violent crime rates in the country. No full-service grocery stores. All of these are already toxicities that impact the life course trajectory of children. And this water crisis is one added toxicity to the entire community.
But I think that's one of the most horrible things is the permanent damage.
It's an irreversible neurotoxin, so there is no cure, there is no antidote, there is no magic pill, which is why in public health we are taught that in lead poisoning, lead exposure, we're supposed to do something called primary prevention, which means we're never supposed to expose a population to lead. But we failed at that here in Flint because an entire population was exposed to lead.
And it's not going away.
It's not going away, and we can't take it away, but what this book conveys is the activism, the resistance, and the hope to minimize the impact of this crisis, to flip the story for the children of Flint. We can't take it away, but we have put into place right now in Flint a model public health program to share with this country. So the things that we are doing here are things that children everywhere need. We've put into place things like early child care centers, near universal preschool, literacy programs, mobile grocery stores, Medicaid expansion, breastfeeding services, mindfulness programming, and the list goes on and on and on of the science-based interventions we have put into place to limit, to mitigate, to buffer the impact of this crisis.
One of the fascinating things with horrible things is how bureaucrats prevented, obfuscated, your efforts to try to deal with the crisis, including the government. In my book, you're a hero because you faced them all.
Ethically, morally, professionally, we could not sit back and just see the consequences of this trauma, of this water crisis. So from the moment that I realized that we had this widespread crisis, my focus became the tomorrows of these kids. As a pediatrician, I have literally taken an oath to protect these children. And so much of what we do in pediatrics is not about how the child is today, but how the child is going to be in 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years. It is about protecting the potential of our children. But what was happening in our water was threatening the tomorrows of all of our children. So when we realized that we were in the midst of this crisis, our focus became preserving the tomorrows of these children. And that's exactly what we're doing with these science-based interventions to promote the development of our kids.
People started standing up.
People started standing up. Yeah, so it's unfortunate. To this day, we are still under a public health emergency. The people of Flint, this is 4+ years out from the water switch, are still advised to be on filtered water and bottled water because we are replacing those damaged lead pipes. So yeah, we are still struggling with the everyday issues of water, yet trying to get children especially connected to these programs to improve their outcomes.
Extensive is this problem now?
It is a story of the failure of government, but there's also a lot of stories in here of bureaucrats, government officials who were trying to do their job. I think a great example is Miguel del Toro at the EPA. He offered to use his own money to see what was going on in Flint. He came and sampled and did disobedient things like release a memo when he wasn't supposed to make sure that people were aware of this issue. And Flint is also a story where government elected officials also were true public servants. Our state senator, Jim Ananek, our Congressman Kildee, our U.S. representative, our 2 U.S. senators, Peters and Stabenow, fought day in and continue to fight day in and day out for Flint. So it is very much of a story of failure of some parts of government, but also where government should work as it's supposed to.
People started standing up.
People started standing up.
I saw a news report trying to change it from poisoning to just exposure.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly why I wrote this book, What the Eyes Don't See. So we do not see acute intoxication of lead anymore. Back in the day, decades ago, kids would come in with seizures and acute intoxications in coma because of acute ingestions of lead from paint and from gasoline exposure. We don't see that anymore. That's history. But we now have learned a lot since then, and we've learned that those levels are no longer okay, and that there is no safe level. So this game of semantics is really a lack of education from myopic, often physicians, who fail to understand that just because you do not see a child with acute poisoning does not mean that there's not a problem. So that's exactly why I wrote this book, to open the eyes of a lot of folks to what lead does.
What I thought was fascinating how you used research as a counterman as a response, a disciplined, informed response. And that wasn't always easy either.
Flint is a story where science was dismissed and denied and disrespected. Basic science, like not just the science of what was happening in children's blood, but the science of corrosion of engine parts, the science that we had the data that there was lead in the water, and then my science. All of that science was dismissed and denied, which resonates with what is happening right now in our nation, where there's a denial of facts and a denial of common sense science, such as climate change science or the regulations at the EPA that protect our air and our water quality. So this is a story that goes way beyond Flint in that respect. So science was dismissed, but ultimately it was our science that spoke truth to power. Our science was attacked when it came out. The numbers were attacked, but we fought back with more science and with more evidence and with more facts. And driving us in that fight was the recognition that our numbers were not just numbers. Our science was not just evidence. It was each number represented a child that I'd probably cared for in the last year or so. And that is what drove us to fight back with our science. And ultimately, the state conceded.
Well, it was a struggle at times to get the science part of it done, to have responsible research. You talk throughout the book as kind of a thread about what you went through in order to get good, solid research.
Yeah, I knew that we had to be right. I knew that my data, my numbers had to be double-checked and triple-checked. I knew that the science had to be based kind of on previous published research. And the struggle was that we were doing this research in record time. This research that we did to uncover what was happening to the children was done in a span of weeks. But really, it was probably like a year of person hours, because we worked around the clock to get this done and to get this right, because we knew what was at stake.
What was pretty impressive is to get solid research, not just adding numbers, but to really get responsible.
Absolutely. And we had preliminary data that showed increases, but we couldn't share that because our sample size was so small. So we knew we had to get even more data. We knew it had to be statistically significant before we went public.
And the wondering question is, can we ever completely recover from this crisis?
Jim, I think we can, and that is what I get to do every day. So I am privileged and I am blessed to wake up every day to work in our recovery here in Flint. I am committed to making sure that our children in Flint have the brightest future possible. I am committed to not only making sure that our kids here in Flint succeed but thrive, but also that we have the ability to share what we are doing with other communities where there are children every day waking up in similar crises of lost democracy, crises of environmental injustice, crises of racism and neglect and lost opportunity. So it is our goal here to make sure that we make an impact on many, many more children beyond these city walls.
One of the side stories here is that you're an immigrant. And I think that's pretty magnificent how immigrants can contribute to a nation's welfare.
We are all immigrants except our Native Americans. This book is weird. This book is not just a Flint book. This book is a lot about me. It's a memoir. To understand who I am, what I did, and why I did what I did, you have to get to know me. And part of who I am is very much an Arab American first generation immigrant. I am somebody who wakes up every day lucky and fortunate to be in this country. But it's also a perspective that allows me to realize what injustice is. So I came from a place where I very much acutely understood what people in power could do to vulnerable populations. When I was growing up, my parents never shielded us from what was going on back home in Iraq. I remember so keenly being 11 or 12 years old, and my father showing me, telling me about the massacre in Hanna-Attisha in northern Iraq, where Saddam Hussein literally poisoned an entire city of his own people, Kurdish people, with poisonous gas. 5,000 people died that day. And I still remember seeing those images of this little baby with her father, both lifeless on the streets in the book. So that is kind of the perspective, the milieu that I grew up in, knowing acutely what injustice was, knowing that I have a role to play no matter where I am, who I am, what my profession is, in fighting for justice. So that background is important to this story, so folks realize kind of where I'm coming from and why I do this work.
Interesting thread was your role in your own family, in your mother, in her cooking, and then the larger culture, and then what happened when you came here. And in all instances, everyone worked to succeed and overcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, my family story is an American dream realized. We came to this country for opportunity, for freedom, for democracy, for the American dream, and I am blessed and fortunate that it was realized for my family. And for me, my work is the ability to give back, to make sure that all children and families have that ability to achieve that same dream. Because the kids that I take care of in Flint do not have that same access. They wake up to a nightmare. They wake up in a zip code that predicts their entire life course trajectory, and that's unjust.
Well, thank you for being on.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Hello, this is Rip Rap, the academic book television program. I'm Jim Schaefer, the executive producer and program host. This program, we're going to continue our discussion of impeachment based on the book by Lawrence Tribe and Joshua Metz called To End the Presidency, The Power of Impeachment. In this book, they raise some very important issues. They talk about how impeachment haunts Trumpland, referring to Donald Trump, the president. Never before has an American leader so quickly faced such credible, widespread calls for his removal. President Donald J. Trump fueled these fires by rejecting bipartisan norms of presidential conduct and by ferociously attacking anyone who dared challenge him. In our previous program, we had a major discussion of impeachment. And this program is going to be an extension of that because we went to a session held in Lansing, Michigan by Tom Steyer, a billionaire who's working for the impeachment of the president. So the difference with this program is that this is sort of an in-presence kind of journalism where we are at the assembly, and so the camera may be a little jerky because we did have the ability to set it up exactly the way we wanted it, but it has Tom Strayer speaking about the importance of what's going on and other details, so we hope that you enjoy this.
Going back and trying to take it away now, consistently and intentionally, seems like something both immoral and illegal. And let me say this specifically. We're on 412 college campuses across this country. In every state we're in, if there's an HBCU, a historically black college or university, we're on it. Biggest partner in California is the African American Voter Registration, Education, and Participation Project. Because we know when we talk about underrepresented communities, we do mean young people. We do mean people of color. We mean the people who aren't registered and voting at the same proportions, because what elected officials care about is the votes. And it is really important for those communities to get the organization to show up. Because in fact, that is how their voice will be heard, and we consider it of paramount importance.
So mine was Detroit and California.
We're going to see you after this.
I don't mind working hard. You know?
Well, we have 85 days. This is going to be a critical, it's not going to be the last critical 85 days.
Good for him.
It's going to be an 85 days where we absolutely have to perform, where we all have to show up and work hard. So thank you, and we'll see you after.
All right, let's get back to Lisa. Yes, Beth G. from Twitter asks, how do we persuade moderate Republicans to vote for Democrats?
So I think there are two answers to that question. One is that the most important thing we can do? And the other is, how do we persuade them? So let me just say, my opinion about this to a very large extent is that the elephant in the room in American politics is the absence of a positive vision for America in the 21st century. And when we come forward and explain what the American people can get and deserve that has been taken away from them, I believe that vision is the thing that will pull anyone with an open mind to what we need, because really the corporate interests have taken so much away from the American people. I don't think we even recognize at this point how much we've lost.
I agree.
That's my first point.
Yeah,
My second point is this. I think that what we should focus on is making sure that I think 85% of the people in this country have gotten a raw deal for 40 years. And I don't think we need to focus on the swing Republican moderate voter. I think what we need to focus on is 85% of the people who haven't had a raise, the people who the healthcare costs are eating up, the young people who the cost of college is eating up, the people who can't get clean air and clean water, which is feel the right to pollute and make us sick is okay. The fact that the people who aren't allowed to organize anymore and stand up for their rights in terms of work, there has been a series of things that have attacked a lot more than the swing moderate Republican voter. And if we tell the truth and actually get back to a democracy representing people and not corporate donors, then I believe that that's what we should focus on. And the moderate Republicans who are smart, they're also good-hearted Americans. They'll recognize the truth when we tell it if we tell it. Real truth. Yeah. So we will be pushing really hard on this. We will be trying to make a case across the board. But ultimately, what we can see is the Republican Party has chosen, for its own reasons, to be the party of Trump. They have chosen to go along with this corporate takeover of our politics and our economy. And we think that it is absolutely critical to get rid of this president but also really for all the people who bought into his agenda and his racism and his attitudes.